Dangeni. I'm currently a postdoc research fellow at Anglo-Ruskin University, and I was an international student myself, and I've been conducting research in this field in the past 6, 7 years in various roles. So today's talk is really based on a recent evaluation project that I focused and I conducted at Newcastle University in my previous role as a professional development advisor. So I aim to challenge some of the old themes and recurring, repeatedly researched topics in the field of research, as well as try to share some findings and to describe in what ways we can identify some new perspectives and new understandings in research with international students. I'll begin with a quick introduction of the research backgrounds, as well as some of the observations I made as a professional in the higher education context in the UK university. And then I'll spend more time on this evaluation project, sharing some key findings, as well as share some key considerations and recommendations for researchers. So I want to quickly set in the scene, sharing some background information. So we've already experiencing and witnessing a growing number of research in this field, and research with international students continue to make thematic contributions. However, most of the research tends to focus on experiences centered around the concepts like integration, adaptation, acculturation. However, these concepts are mostly vaguely defined and has been considered and used interchangeably. And among the extensive literature and empirical evidence with international students, very limited effort as well as outputs has been devoted to pedagogies with and for international students. So this was so relevant to my previous role, and I'll give you a little bit more information later on. And finally, something very relevant to the second bullet points there is compared with the empirical evidence, very little practical implications can be found that can be shared with the wider stakeholders who work with or support international students in various roles. So for example, the academics, the professionals, the learning developers, as well as the professionals in the student support team, for example. And in my previous role, I was a professional development advisor in the university Central Learning and Teaching Development Service. And I think the everyday practice with international students, as well as any internationalization effort, can be considered as navigating the muddy water. So for example, how we position international students in policy, in research, and in practice seems to be very scattered. Example could be when we're talking about mobility initiatives at the institution level. In many cases, they're really talking about the students, mostly undergraduate students who are going to study abroad for short-term program or exchange program, rather than considering international students as part of the conversation. And another key concept is EDI, the equality, diversity, and inclusion, which is such a buzzword and important initiative happening across universities. However, when we're looking at some of the existing initiatives or how the research has been developed under this overarching concept EDI, most of the research or practices tends to focus on students with disadvantaged backgrounds as well as accessibility issues, rather than considering international students as part of the policy, the practice, and the conversation. And I also noticed that there's so much going on at program and institution level. So for example, mostly conducted by staff members who work with or teach international students. And there are so many initiatives are self-exploratory or on an ad hoc basis. So instead of sharing this or promote this widely, sharing the knowledge, most of them are basically at the individual or local level. And finally, when we were talking about supporting or research work with international students, there's always a changing focus along with the demographics or the recruitment priorities. So for example, I might have colleagues reaching out saying we're having a great number of international students, in particular from China. So how do I support them? But this can be changed very quickly when universities shift the recruitment priorities, when they're targeting students from certain countries, and they might come up with different needs and practices. So there's such a isolated research and practice that is going on at the institution level. And I want to conclude such background information with some of the inquiries I received from the very senior management team at institution level. So they asked me about how do international students think are the purposes of seminars and lectures. And they asked about how do staff best design seminars and group work, which will encourage and support our Chinese students to feel more confident to participate in group work and group discussions. So as you can see, the focus is really centered around a particular cohort rather than focus widely on inclusive pedagogies and practices. So I conducted this evaluation project around understanding and supporting international students. But before going to the details regarding the key findings, I want to give you a quick tour of how I developed this evaluation project. So as I shared, I was a professional development advisor. So my role was really supporting staff members, including supervisors, academics, and also postgraduate research students with teaching responsibilities regarding how to create and foster an inclusive education environment and how to support learners in a more engaging classroom. And when I joined the university and the department in late 2022, after I completed my PhD, I was suggested by my line manager saying, since you got a thesis around international students, and we got such a needs and a taste and an interest around this topic at institution level, so are you willing or can you navigate potential ways that you can quickly translate some findings and develop some materials for staff members? So what I did was I employed the university level learning platform, which is Canvas, and I designed this module on understanding and supporting international students. So basically what I did was to conduct multiple rapid literature review as well as translate the findings from my thesis quickly, which was around international students' experiences in the UK. And the materials, the module was consisted of online content as well as in-person workshops. And it was launched in mid-2023, and by mid-2024, it has attracted over 500 colleagues across Newcastle University engaged with either the online or the in-person workshops. So by the time the project was proposed, it was considered essential and timely to evaluate the effectiveness of the materials and to seek some feedback regarding how useful they are and what are missing in the materials in order to better support colleagues. So I proposed this study and conduct this research with those who use the materials as well as who might benefit from it. So they are staff members as well as students. And I designed a multi-method study, including a 6-week online diary with 14 staff members, including academics, professional staff members, as well as graduate teaching assistants. And also I organized focus groups with 33 students, including both home students and international students, including undergraduates, PGTs, and PGRs. So let's moving on to some of the key findings and the topic for today's presentation. So I want to start by challenging some of the old themes. So for example, in this table on the left-hand side are some of the key concepts and terms that has been researched, described, and discussed in existing literature. And on the right-hand column are the findings, in particular some quotes from participants. So the first one regarding some of the old and repeatedly researched theme is around being passive learners, lacking certain skills and competences. This staff member in her online diary shared a refreshed story from one of her conversations with the students. So she organized an event and invited a PhD student to reflect on the assessment and feedback. And the student was really able to reflect on her own experiences and share potential strategies in terms of how to try to understand the feedback, and also highlight it is really important to make the feedback very clear so that students can know what to improve and how to improve. So instead of being passive and lacking certain skills, actually what these staff sharing regarding this PhD student is a new understanding of or countering these deficit narratives. They're no longer passive learners as long as they're supporting or guided learning to helping them making sense of the key element of the learning and teaching. And they are able to succeed in their learning, and the feedback and assessment is one of the example. And then the second key theme is around critical thinking and adaptation, because the existing literature tends to criticize or arguing that students should be fully responsible to integrate to the study, adapt to the British learning environment and the learning and teaching provision. However, students shared slightly different understandings, like this student who is in his final year as a medical student, and he shared her experiences regarding self-directed learning. And he said, I think self-directed learning is good, but I think it's overused here. And I found myself and my friends have to teach ourselves a lot, but I don't know whether the university is making changes. And as you can see, it's very similar to the previous sharing regarding it's not only relying on the learners themselves, but also considering at the program level, at the departmental level, and even the institution level, what we can do to support learner to be more engaging as well as a agentic contributor to the learner, because they are able to succeed and they are capable of experiencing this inclusive education journey. And finally, regarding the silence that has also been extensively described in the classroom when we're talking about international students as passive learners not contributing to the classroom, this particular PGR student, who is also a graduate teaching assistant, shared some of his observations. And he said, sometimes the classroom can be very silent, and I think the university should do more about it. Sometimes they do not engage properly, but it does not mean they're not interested. Give them more time and more consideration for them to engage with the learning. So instead of arguing international students being passive contributors in the classroom or even not contributing to the classroom, it's just essential to understand what they bring to this journey, as well as allowing time and provide support in order to make them engage with the classroom activities and discussions. And the findings, as you can imagine, is very rich and also enabled me to identify some new findings. So for example, regarding the challenges, we can see quite a lot, and as well as Sylvie and Jenna addressed earlier today in the opening remarks, challenges has been overly researched and also broadly researched. So here I identified some challenges, but it's very interesting to have a closer look at those challenges. So for this PGT student in the Faculty of Science, Agriculture and Engineering, and she shares some of the struggles regarding navigating multiple platforms. So for example, she said, I feel like it's very difficult to keep track of stuff because sometimes there are certain assignments, like the submissions, some of them on Canvas, some on another platform called S3P, and it's such a massive system, and it could be integrated together. And some of the information is in the assignment itself, and some of them are in the module materials, some of them are in the emails. So everything is like so scattered, and you have to bring the bits together by yourself, and you know it is stressful. And it is particularly interesting because in my previous institution, Newcastle University, even as a staff member myself, I found it was really challenging to understand how does it work when multiple platforms are adopted and employed, and what's the differences along with those platforms. And it can be challenging in particular for PGT students who are here for a very short period of time, and in what ways the institutions can support them brings us very important questions. And then regarding the curriculum internationalization, because we've seen quite a number of studies has been conducted around decolonizing or decolonization of the curriculum. And these quotes from a student shared some of a specific or scenario or story. So for example, he shared, UK is not a tropical country, so topics around tropics won't be taught here, and it has been very centered on the British model. And I suppose there's a limit to how international you can be. Ultimately, I think they're trying to produce doctors for this country and not for another country. And university should recognize the need for global mobility, as some graduates may want to pursue international careers. So it's not only about curriculum, but also reflect on the applicability of the content and consider students' potential career trajectories. And the final theme here is very relevant and similar to the career options and trajectories mentioned by the previous participant. So she was reflecting on the university career service, and she said, you can find this job and this on online platforms. But for international students, once we graduate, we need a sponsorship. And it's very different and difficult to hear advice when it doesn't apply to you. And also when she was trying to book appointment, it's always difficult to find appointment available, and it's not really available. So when we're talking about tailored support and also the supporting provisions for student cohort, and to what extent we're really developing subject-specific support for students in terms of learning as well as career options. And I think these new findings are some of the examples can shed light on really important lessons as well as critical points for institutions to consider in terms of who we are teaching and who we are supporting, and also raise the significance to understand what they bring to this journey and where they want to be after this journey. And finally, I want to finish with this slide regarding some of the key considerations and future research. So it's extremely important avoiding stereotypes and recognize the diverse identities of the students. So for example, when we're talking about challenges and competences, if you start with considering them as passive, silent, and in a deficit-based understanding, and this will naturally lead to a stereotypical understanding when we're researching this topic or conducting research with international students. And also considering the diverse student cohort in the current research. For example, students might coming from working class backgrounds, as well as students with caring responsibilities. The supporting provisions and the learning and teaching should be considered and tailored for the diverse needs. And the second point is regarding co-constructing the knowledge with research participants. And in order to do so, and I raise these key points for researchers in this field regarding engaging multiple stakeholders, so not only from students' perspective, staff's perspective, professionals, etc. All stakeholders supporting international students should be considered when we're trying to make claims, and also reflect on the positionality. And given my previous role as a researcher practitioner, I think it is really important for researchers to further develop research-informed practice, as well as providing guidance for practice-based research, especially for those who are new to research in this field. And that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions. And this is the work in progress, so any feedback, comments, questions would be really helpful.